Thank you, Norman Tail. Awesome. So in this world of human experience that we are all a part of, what does it mean to be big for God? And I'm talking about mind-blowing, knock your socks off, never thought I could do this big for God. Because that's why we're here. You do know that, yes? We're here to express our God selves. That's and big. To really step out of playing it small and really express what's in our hearts and what we came here to express. And it takes a great willingness and our willingness to dare greatly. The talks this month are by Brene Brown's on her book. They're based on the book Daring Greatly. So the whole month, and I'm going to continue it into next week. For those of you who are going to be here next week, we're going to cap it off. But to dare greatly means to be willing to. Not know how, but try anyway. Be scared, but do it anyway. Feel self-conscious, but show up anyway. Not have a clue of the outcome, but take a risk anyway. Feel naked, but be authentic and real anyway. To dare greatly means to live wholeheartedly. We talked about living wholeheartedly, and that's by cultivating the courage, the compassion, and the connection to be able to live in a place where we can say, I may be imperfect in what I do, and sometimes I'm afraid, and sometimes I play small, and sometimes I mess up a little, and in big ways. But that doesn't change the truth that I am also worthy of love and belonging and connection, and that I am also absolutely capable of being gigantically big for God and accomplishing amazing good in the world. That is exactly what I came here to do, because that's what I truly came here to do. To express the big God self within each and every one of us. And all of this gets to one word. And we are exploring this one word for the whole month and into March too, because it's so good. I don't want to leave any of it out. In this, the key though to daring to live greatly, to live from that wholehearted place, to the real key, the word that this is based on, is vulnerability. And you know, this happens. I want you to know that I work on this talk, and I do this whole talk at home. And this happened the last time I did this talk on vulnerability. I'm so vulnerable that I couldn't say the word. So it kept coming out like that. So just go with it. I'm being vulnerable for you. Spirit wants you to see what it's really like to be vulnerable. The minister can't say the word, okay? So really, besides me, what does it mean to be vulnerable? So according to Brene Brown, it means to be able to live in uncertainty. To live in uncertainty. To be willing to take risks. To be okay with emotional exposure. In other words, be willing to not know how, but try anyway. Be scared, but do it anyway. Feel self-conscious, but show up anyway. Not have a clue of the outcome, but take a risk anyway. Being vulnerable has gotten a lot of bad rap, both externally in our outside world and internally in our heads, our inside world. So we're going to move this morning from a couple of myths that we might be operating under, and we're going to move into the magic of being vulnerable and what happens when you are willing to do so. So myth number one is vulnerability is weakness. So if you are vulnerable, you are weak. This is a pretty widely accepted myth. To really bear who we really are, that's a myth. So we got to hold it in and put up that protective wall. And we've all heard the phrase, don't let them see you sweat. That's what it pertains to. So according to Brown's research, vulnerability is actually the core of all emotions and feelings. To feel is to be vulnerable. To believe vulnerability is weakness, then, is to believe that feelings are weak. That all of our feelings are weak. So Brown writes this: what most of us fail to understand, and what took a decade of research to learn, is that vulnerability is the cradle of the emotions and experiences we crave. Vulnerability is the birthplace of love, belonging, joy, courage, and creativity. It is the source of hope, empathy, accountability, and authenticity. If we want greater clarity, she writes, in our purpose or deeper and more meaningful spiritual lives, vulnerability is the path. So while Ernest Holmes does not speak directly to the idea of, Ernest Holmes is the founder of religious science, which is what this is, a center of religious science. He often spoke, he didn't speak about vulnerability, but he often spoke about the feeling state, about and the technique and the fire. And what we call affirmative prayer is spiritual mind treatment. Is affirmative prayer is what it is. And he wrote in his Science of Mind textbook, our mental acceptance should be filled with conviction, warmth, color, and imagination. The creative power responds to feeling more quickly than to any other mental attitude. Vulnerability is not weakness. When we do spiritual mind treatment, Veronica did one earlier, you heard affirmative prayer. You could feel, I could feel, the fire in her heart. You could feel the strength. It is the feeling behind the words that the law of attraction, the immutable laws of the universe respond to. So vulnerability is not a weakness. In fact, it is vitally important for us to live fully and to express God in the biggest way possible. You gotta be vulnerable. You gotta breathe and let go. That's the let go and let God part. In her research, Brown asked people what it meant to be vulnerable to them. And here were some of their answers. And you think, do they seem weak to you? So these were some of the answers she received. Sharing an unpopular opinion. Standing up for myself. The big one for me here. Asking for help. Saying no. Starting my own business. Initiating intimacy with my partner. The first date after my divorce. I didn't write these either. That's being, oh, it's not even in the room. That's being vulnerable. Saying I love you, not knowing if the person's going to say it back. Getting promoted and not knowing if you can succeed. Getting fired. Trying something new. Anything that we change or move out of our normal way of doing something new is being vulnerable. And there's a whole bunch more, but just having faith was one of them. Asking for forgiveness, we'll have to put that one in. Asking for forgiveness. So do these sound like weaknesses to you? No. No. Does showing up to be with someone in deep struggle, accepting accountability for your life, being responsible for what you are thinking, saying, and doing, is that weakness? Is it stepping up to the plate again and again? Is that a sign of weakness? I don't think so. I don't think so. But in order to get to that power, that strength of who we truly are, stepping out in our greatness, we need to be vulnerable. Vulnerability sounds more like truth and courage in each and every one of us, in all of those areas. In truth and courage, and they're not always comfortable. You notice that? Have you noticed that? When you go to do something brand new that you have not done before, or you hear a diagnosis that you really don't want to hear, it doesn't feel comfortable. But these are the areas where we stand up in our strength, our power. They are not weakness. Vulnerability is strength. There's actually some very persuasive leadership research that supports this idea of vulnerability and courage, and that they are important as leadership qualities. So in a 2011 Harvard Business Review article, Peter Fuda and Richard Badham used a series of metaphors to explore how leaders spark and sustain change. One of the metaphors is a snowball. And the snowball starts rolling down the hill when a leader is willing to be vulnerable with those he or she leads. Their research shows that this act of vulnerability is perceived as courage by the team members and inspires others to follow suit. And here's a very interesting paradox. We see vulnerability as courageous in others, yet we see it as weakness in ourselves. Who is our worst critic? People can insult us all they want, but who insults us more than anyone else? But it is never a weakness. That vulnerability is never a weakness. It never is. So myth number 2. If I'm vulnerable, I will be hurt. There's some truth to that myth. You might be. But it's worth the risk. And there is something you can do to minimize that risk. So in that state of being vulnerable, it's not a state of oversharing. It is not purging. It's not indiscriminate disclosure. I'm going to be vulnerable, so I'm just going to tell everyone everything. It's about sharing our feelings and our experiences with the people who have earned the right to hear them. We can't always have guarantees in place before we risk share. That's the whole point of a risk. However, we don't bare our souls the first time we meet someone either. We don't lead with, "Hi, my name is Margaret, and here is my deepest, darkest struggle." That's first time you meet them, right? That's not vulnerability. That's stupidity. Why? Because sharing appropriately means sharing with people with whom we have a relationship already, where we kind of know each other, but just stepping a little bit further outside of maybe that comfort zone. So some of the questions you might ask: can I trust this person enough so that I can be vulnerable and show what's really in my heart? I'll only be vulnerable with someone if I'm sure they won't turn on me, which we can never know. How can you tell who's got your back? These are some of the questions we go through our mind before we're going to share one of those soul-searching moment things that's in us that was so uncomfortable and we just would rather hide and go back the other way. But do you ever notice how children are just so vulnerable? They don't care what you think. They just do it anyway. Their emotions are on their sleeve. They don't care. This is learned behavior. We have put up these walls and these blocks to keep us from getting hurt, and they served us very well. But now it's time to make a little creek, a little space in those walls so that that vulnerability, which is our feeling state, can come through. And we can be who we really are, because we can't be who we really are when we're not vulnerable with that, with ourselves. And that takes great self-love. So I have something that is a bit like the chicken and the egg issue. We need to feel trust in order to be vulnerable, or we need to be vulnerable in order to trust. Your choice. Your choice. There is no trust test, by the way. There is no, you either trust or you don't trust. No scoring system, no green light that tells you that it's safe. It's safe to let ourselves be ourselves. Wow, who we really are. But somebody has to start in all relationships. Someone has to start. I'm talking about all relationships. Someone has to try. Someone has to dip their toes in that ocean of vulnerability and see what happens. So we go to myth number 3. I can do it alone. I can do it alone. Going alone is a value that we seem to hold in very high esteem. I can do it. I got it. I got it handled. I can take care of it. But the truth is, this journey through life is not one that we can really make alone. We are not meant to make it alone. We need support. We need folks who will let us try on new ways of being without being judged. That's the beauty of community. You see it in the classes. People will say, well, you're going to think I'm crazy if I say that. And they go, no, we won't. Because we've heard it all. It's fine. Be who you truly are in an appropriate way, but be who you truly are. We need a hand to pull us up sometimes off that ground when we get kicked down, and we will. It feels that way anyway in life. You know, stuff happens. We talk about that. Stuff will happen. And it takes a courageous person to put their hand up and say, I need help. Across the course of Brown's research, participants were very clear about their need for support and encouragement as they navigate through life. Most of us are so good with giving help, aren't we? We're the best. But receiving it? We have to ask for help. That could be a problem. So Brown writes about that. She says, until we receive help with an open heart, we are never really giving with an open heart. When we attach judgment to receiving help, we knowingly or unknowingly attach judgment to giving help. We all need help. We can get by with a little help from our friends. And I'm not going to repeat the next line. Starhawk wrote in her book, Dreaming the Dark, and we're going to end with this, describes the power of community. Somewhere, she writes, there are people to whom we can speak with passion without having the words catch in our throats. Somewhere, a circle of hands will open to receive us. Eyes will light up as we enter. Voices will celebrate with us whenever we come into our own power. Community means strength that joins our strength to do the work that needs to be done. Arms to hold us when we falter. A circle of healing. A circle of friends. Someplace where we can be free, or we can relax, let down the guard for a moment in our life, and just be. That's the whole point of having a community, that we can come together and be who we truly are, and get hugged. You know, lots of hugs, lots of love, lots of joy, lots of compassion, and lots of courage. Lots of courage. And so, there is magic in vulnerability. Try it. Try being a little vulnerable. Take the baby steps in your life. Say the thing to the person that you might have wanted to say it, but you didn't want to let down the guard. Just take those baby steps. And let's as a community, let's then set our intention. I invite you, if you care to do some small acts of vulnerability this week, because you don't have to do it alone. Just remember that. So good.